Hinton Ampner House is an elegant stately home that dates way back to the 1790s. While today it boasts one of the best gardens in England and provides a place where you can get a bacon sandwich and plant pot combo, it is the original Tudor house which used to stand alongside the building, which gained a reputation so sinister that its owners decided to demolish it. I'm Bleaki, and today I will tell you about the fascinating haunting of Hinton Ampner, which includes a very dark family secret which convinced a sceptical resident that her house was being tormented by restless spirits and forced servants to quit their positions.
Oh, your baby has gone down the plug, oh, your baby has gone down the plug. The poor little thing was so skinny and thin.
Hinton Ampner was already more than a century old when in 1719 the heiress Mary Skewkelly married Edward Starwell. Mary was a decade older than her husband and had 2 children with Edward. Mary inherited Hinton Ampner Manor after her father passed away, and along with it got the guardianship of her much younger sister, Honoria. What an unfortunate name. Kinda sounds like something you'd catch on a wild night out. While this seems an innocent and selfless action, it was this agreement that began the torment those living at Hinton Ampner had to endure. In 1740, Mary Skewkelly died, leaving behind her husband, a daughter, and a younger sister, Honoria. By this time, the social norms meant that people expected her to be married and be a mistress of her own stately home, but she decided to stay at Hinton Ampner. Now, this wasn't so she could sit on the couch eating Cheetos and doing the equivalent of watching the Kardashians all day. Oh no. It was because she had fallen in love with her brother-in-law, her own deceased sister's husband, but he claimed he didn't feel the same. The servants, however, knew different. In fact, they were horrified by what was going on at the house and spread the word that Honoria had a child secretly born at Hinton Ampner, which was done away with. Now, that may sound a little extreme, but at the time, a relationship like that was against the law as they were considered family. Edward inherited his childless brother's title in 1742 after he died without a direct heir, but he did not move to his brother's manor but remained at Hinton Ampner with Honoria. Honoria eventually died in 1754, with Edward following within a year, dying of a stroke on April 2nd, 1755, at just 56 years of age. Soon after, servants still living at the manor started reported seeing the ghost of their former master wearing a beige coat he often wore in life. Hinton Ampner passed into the hands of Henry Bilson Legg, the husband of Edward's only daughter, as part of a marriage arrangement. The couple only used the manor for a few weeks a year during the hunting season and left it in the care of 3 old servants who had been there since Mary Skewkelly was a little girl. Legg died in 1764 and his widow married the Earl of Hillsborough soon after. Weddings back then were as frequent as birthday parties. The couple decided they had no more use for Hinton Ampner and rented it out to Henry and Mary Jarvis Ricketts along with their 3 young children. It was during the following 6 years that the hauntings ramped up and became truly chilling. Now, Mary was quite sceptical of the paranormal, but all that was about to change. Mary decided to keep a journal of all the activity that was experienced in the house, which was kept secret by the Ricketts family up until the 1870s. From the day they moved in, the family were tormented by strange noises and phantom moans throughout the house, as well as doors slamming. At one point, the family thought that a couple of servants had chosen to partake in some afternoon delight over afternoon tea in the servants' quarters. When a family member rushed through the area, no one was there. They eventually decided that villagers must have been sneaking in the house to try and scare the family and the servants. They changed all the locks, but the noises continued. During the summer of 1765, the nurse for the youngest Ricketts child was tidying up when she saw a man wearing a beige coat walk into the yellow bedchamber directly across from the nursery. The woman thought it was a guest and thought nothing of it, but when she asked the other servants who the guest was, they reassured her that no one was visiting. The house was searched, but the man was never found. Shortly after, a groom staying at the house also crossed paths with the man in the beige coat standing in the entrance hall. The groom mistook the man for a butler, but was surprised to find out that the butler was already in bed in the servants' quarters and had not been downstairs since earlier that evening. See, this is one of my biggest fears, that when we die we have to wear the clothes that we died in for eternity. Imagine being known as the Phantom in the Budgie Smuggler. Of course, from the previous sighting from the old servants, this was believed to be the spirit of Lord Starwell. In July of 1767, the servants were drinking tea in the kitchen when they heard a woman's footsteps coming down the service stairs. They could tell it wasn't another servant as they could hear the rustling of a gown or silk dress. They also knew it didn't sound like the footsteps of Mary Ricketts. They then saw a tall woman pass the kitchen door and walk in the direction of the passageway to the yard outside. At that moment, however, a delivery man came into the house from the other side of the passage, which meant that they would have passed each other, but when asked, the man said he didn't see anyone. While they didn't note at the time, the woman they described was Honoria, who was never seen again, but was certainly heard. Around the same time, the noises that had disturbed the household from the beginning kept getting worse, with human groans, rustling and phantom footsteps being heard daily. The servants told Mary Ricketts about the haunting, but she laughed it off. But it wouldn't stay funny for long. Henry Ricketts was a businessman who had to travel often. In 1769, he took a long voyage to Jamaica, leaving his wife and children at Hinton Ampner with their 8 servants. It was this decision that changed Mary's entire philosophy, as the spirits seemed to become more empowered with the absence of Henry. At this point, Mary was unaware or just not bothered by the strange noises, believing they had to be natural. That was until she heard footsteps in rooms while she was alone, as well as hearing the sound of a rustling dress coming towards her that suddenly stopped when they got close to her. Mary was even awoken when sleeping in the infamous yellow bedroom by the sound of silk rustling over her head, as if somebody was leaning over her. In the winter of 1769, Mary received a visit from an old man living in the poorhouse at West Meon, which was located close by. He told her that it was common knowledge that a carpenter had made a hidey hole under the dining room floor for Sir Hugh, the father of Mary and Honoria, many years before. While Mary found the information interesting, she wasn't interested enough to start pulling up the floorboards to look for the hidey hole, which would have presumably hidden documents for the previous master of Hinton Ampner. Unbeknownst to the current residents, the decision to not investigate meant that they missed their chance to stop the haunting there and then. In the summer of 1770, Mary was once startled by the sound of a man's footsteps coming towards her in the yellow bedroom. She never heard the footsteps again. She later moved to another room across the hall to escape the strange noises, but heard the sound of music and the sound of banging on the door with a blunt object. When she called for help, the servants found no one there, and once again, these particular sounds were never repeated. The following winter, Mary started experiencing a strange murmuring noise that filled the entire house, especially at night. She said that most people might have mistaken it for the wind in the roof of the house, but the strange thing was that it could be heard even on nights when there was no wind. On April 2nd, 1771, which just happened to be the anniversary of Lord Starwell's death in 1755, Mary was awakened by the sounds of people walking noisily in the hall outside of her bedroom. She listened to the ruckus for about 20 minutes in terror before waking up her maid. The two of them not only heard the loud footsteps, but also heard the door to the yellow bedroom opening and closing. The rest of the floor were woken up, and a search proved that no one except Mary, the maid and the children were on the second floor. What was even more bizarre was that the yellow bedroom door was locked. As the summer rolled on, the hollow murmuring turned into the sounds of 3 angry voices, one of which was higher pitched and clearly a woman. They were carrying on a conversation, but none of their words were ever distinguishable. Like when you're trying to listen into an argument happening next door, but can't make out what exactly is being said. Admit it, you do it too. These sounds often went all night and into the next morning, before going quiet. Mary Ricketts had kept a written record of all the activity and was now fully convinced that Hinton Ampner was haunted. In that journal she wrote, These things were beyond the power of any mortal agent to perform, but knowing how exploded such opinions are, I kept them in my own bosom and hoped my resolution would enable me to support whatever might befall. Less than a month after writing those words, she and her family would leave Hinton Ampner. In late July 1771, the haunting seemed to calm down for a while when Mary's brother, John, who was a naval officer, stayed at the house. Interestingly, the haunting was quelled whenever there was a man in the house. Unfortunately, John's stay was short-lived, and after he left, the noises came back even worse. This time, it sounded like something heavy was being dumped outside the door, which was followed by a blood-curdling woman's scream. The scream repeated until it finally seemed to fade beneath the floor. Mary hadn't told her brother about the hauntings out of fear of being ridiculed. Let's face it, Mary did it herself when the servants reported strange activity to her. Why should her brother not do the same? When John did return, however, she plucked up the courage and told him everything. Seeing that everyone in the house were at their wits' end, with several servants quitting their positions, he, his manservant and a fellow officer from the Royal Navy sat up all night with their pistols close by. To their shock, they heard phantom gunshots that were followed by groans of agony from somewhere in the house. After investigating, no one else outside of the group was found. What really terrified John was the sound of a heavy object being dropped on the floor, followed by screaming, the same experience as his sister. Following yet another extensive search and finding no source of the sounds, he urged his sister to move out of the house to keep her family safe. Within a week, Hinton Ampner was left empty, except for the spirits. Lady Hillsborough did manage to rent out Hinton Ampner again, although they only managed to stick it out for 6 months after being tormented by noisy spirits. After that, the chilling reputation of Hinton Ampner spread and the old manor stood empty for years with no one wanting to stay there. After growing derelict and increasingly dilapidated, Lady Hillsborough finally decided to demolish the building in 1797 after the newer building close by was completed. No sooner had workmen started the demolition, they discovered something incredibly disturbing within the secret hidey hole. Inside was a box containing a pile of bones that, according to witnesses, appeared to belong to a very small baby. Unfortunately, no professional opinions were ever sought out as to whether or not these could be the remains of the infant whom the servants believed was the child of Lord Starwell and his sister-in-law, Honoria. The only person thought to be able to throw any light on this mystery was an old woman who had been the housekeeper at Hinton Ampner during Lord Starwell's ownership. On her deathbed, she told her family she wanted to make a confession to a member of the Jarvis family about a dark secret, but she sadly passed away before the lady of the house could arrive. With the discovery of the remains, all of the paranormal activity experienced makes more sense. Was Lord Starwell seen going into the yellow room with the doors opening and closing because it was the room where Honoria gave birth to their illicit child? Were the angry voices outside the room an argument about what would happen to the child to save the Lord from being imprisoned after having a relationship with a family member? And was the loud thumping sound and scream outside the door the sound of the body being dumped and the heartbroken screams of a mourning mother? If you enjoyed this video and would like to watch more just like it, make sure you hit the subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. You can also leave me a comment below telling me your thoughts on the haunting of Hinton Ampner. I love interacting with you guys, so get in the comments. And as always, sleep well, friends.
Oh, your baby has gone down the blood hole. Your baby has gone